Alright, so picking off the story where I had last left off, after the events of the UA Sports Festival, the students would all return to the classroom where essentially they're given two tasks. Number one, pick a pro hero name, and number two, pick their little internship. For this specific timeline of events, I'm really not too sure who Deku should go with in terms of the actual hero, but because there's really a limited option of what pro heroes have a water type quirk that we could go to. I mean, there is that one dude that's a seal that likes to make that cute face that Suyu went to intern with. There is Emmanuel, which is currently in the Stain area, which is probably the one I'm going to be choosing. And then Gang Orca, I mean, he has like a whale. He's an orca. Why would I call him a whale? Okay, there's Gang Orca, who looks like he has some sort of water mutation type quirk. I do wonder if he can swim very well underwater. That's something that I've always wondered, but I don't know. Who knows? Anyways, and then when it comes to his pro hero name, I'm honestly not too sure what it is, and I'd ask you guys and be like, oh, pick a hero name down below in the comments, and I'll go on to name him that in the future events of the video. But to be honest, I'm probably gonna finish the story today. So if you guys can think of some really cool pro hero names, comment them down below, and you'll be the pinned comment, not taking attendance. Okay, yeah, you'll be the pinned comment. Anyways, I think the hero that Deku's gonna internship with kind of has to be Emmanuel just for the story to work. I mean, I really do want the whole Stain situation to still happen, so yeah, we're gonna be rolling with that one. Because obviously he can't exactly go with Gran Torino because, you know, he doesn't have one for all, so yeah. I think Emmanuel's the best bet. This will be helping two specific things. Number one, he's going to be there with Ida, so he's going to be having a close eye on Ida, meaning that during the entire time of the internship, he's just going to be taking notes from Emmanuel on how he uses his water quirk, and Emmanuel's going to be absolutely stunned with how much control Deku has with water in his quirk. He's going to be honestly impressed and trying to even ask Deku how he can potentially get stronger with his own quirk. Deku would literally be the one giving pointers to Emmanuel, and this would actually help him get a lot stronger than he is already. This is also going to inspire Deku to get himself more of a pro hero costume that has some more inspiration on aquatic and water and stuff like that, and Emmanuel would even recommend him to go with some sort of Poseidon type look, like the king of the ocean, something along those lines. But regardless, with that being said, Deku would pretty much have a good time there, but the only thing that would be bothering him would be Ida's whole vibe. Something about him just seems strange, and he's not exactly too sure why, but with that being the case, Deku would definitely keep note of that, and ultimately, we would finally have a couple of days passing to which finally, they would be in Hosu where they're pretty much just patrolling when suddenly Ida would disappear. Deku, noticing that Ida would have left the area, would quickly go after him, telling Emmanuel that he's gonna go after Ida and that he'll be right back. Emmanuel would say, "Wait, Izuku, you can't!" But it'd be too late. Deku would already be rushing off in search of Ida, and as we're speaking, Ida would already have encountered the pro hero killer Stain. Although while Ida was already laying flat on his back because he was unconscious. Wait, no, not unconscious, paralyzed. That being said, the second that Izuku would see this and the hero killer, Izuku would be stunned as he would realize he was looking for him this entire time. Izuku at this point would be extremely glad that he chose Emmanuel and not another hero like Gang Orca or even the other seal dude, and Izuku would immediately get into his combat stage, as Ida would say, "Stay out of it, Deku!" But Deku just wasn't hearing it. He was going to be defending Ida one way or the other, and Stain would rush in towards the direction of Izuku to try to cut him and get some of his blood, but Deku using a shield would block Stain off, as Stain would jump back before throwing a dagger at him. Deku would leap out of the way, dodging that easily, as Stain would jump from wall to wall, making his way towards him as he would come at him with a katana. It would be at this moment that Deku would create his own water blade, but actually no, water trident, as Deku would counter Stain, and Stain, seeing that this trident was easily able to like slip his sword down with it, he would do exactly that, slipping it on the trident itself and trying to stab Izuku. At this point, a little piece of water would come out to protect Izuku that would harden itself, leading Stain to be shocked. It's kind of like Gaara's sand defense in the sense that the water didn't act on its own, but it defended him, similar to what Gaara uses. After that would happen, Izuku would pretty much end up like using the sewer that they had underneath him to have the water be controlled like subtly. And as Stain would pretty much like gain some distance and think that this kid is definitely powerful, he would pretty much end up getting shocked as from behind him, he would leap out of the way last second before a bunch of water would shoot at him, which would almost send him crashing to the ground, but he would leap onto the wall as he would stab his dagger into the wall and hang off of that, as Izuku, seeing this, would redirect the water, turning it into a water dragon, as said water dragon would lunge at Stain, and with its teeth it would skewer into Stain's body, crashing him into the trash can, where Stain would be left there looking unconscious seemingly. Deku, seeing this, would proceed to go closer, as Izuku would then remember the last time that Bakugo fought him at the UA Sports Festival, remembering what Bakugo had done, pretending to have fallen unconscious and gotten the jump on him. Deku, realizing that this could be the case from the hero killer, would simply use a water prison to trap the hero killer, and then Stain, which, he definitely was trying to get Deku off guard, it wouldn't end up working anymore. As soon as Deku would capture Stain and the battle would be over, he would end up calling the ambulance for Ida, and then like in the original, Todoroki's presence wouldn't even be needed. Fortunately though, unfortunately though, a Nomu would come flying in. And Izuku, who had already 100% made this hero killer pass out from, lack of oxygen, would end up pretty much forming a trident as he would throw it up into the air, skewering the Nomu's wing as it would fall down onto the ground before then beginning to heal. But as that's happening, Pro Hero Endeavor and Todoroki would come in, as Todoroki would freeze it in place by its legs, because that's the part that hit the ground first, and Endeavor would shoot a scorching flame at the Nomu's brain, which would completely eradicate it. It'd be at this point that Izuku would realize that the brain is its weakness. He would pretty much like smack himself in the head, realizing that had he simply just gone for that, the Nomu might not have been able to regenerate. So Deku, thinking about this, would keep that in mind for the next time he has to encounter one of those freaky Nomu creatures. But with that being the case, the internship would finally be over and they would return back to class, where Izuku and everybody else would pretty much have their training assessed by the school. They're like, alright, well, let's see what you guys have learned. They go through that little section, and after that we would essentially get the Pro Hero final exam. Why do I keep adding Pro Hero? What's up with me today? I don't know, but yeah, we get the hero exams, and it's their first exams, actually. I think it is. Yeah, right. It's their first exams. I'm not sure. Anyways, point is, all of them would end up getting matched up against their teachers, and Izuku, I'm going to say that he still ends up being matched up against All Might, but this actually ends up working in their favor, because even though Deku and Bakugo don't necessarily like each other, that training that they did with each other certainly helped them understand each other's abilities. So when it came to this, even though Bakugo acted as though he didn't want to work with Izuku, he sort of understands that he kind of needs Izuku, and Izuku needs him to defeat All Might. Not really, but yeah. That being the case, both of them would end up ambushing All Might, as Bakugo would let out a barrage of explosions, all the while Deku, inside of a building, would be using the water inside of the sewage and a water tower to his advantage. He would start off by using the water tower to shoot a gigantic burst of water at the direction of All Might, which would actually make contact and send him crashing into a building. But All Might, playing the role of a villain, would come out unscathed practically, as he would rush towards Bakugo, who would pretty much be waiting for All Might to come in and attack him, as all of a sudden the sewage water would completely cover All Might, and All Might would be grabbed from his head, from his shoulders all the way down to his body in a thick water prison, which not even All Might could break out of. After this, Bakugo would walk up closer to All Might, saying, All Might, it doesn't exactly bring me much joy to do this, but it's night for you. Or no, not night. He would say, it's lights out for you, All Might, as he would pull the pin, and bam, 2 explosions, point blank in All Might's face would go off, which would cause a heavy amount of damage on him, right? And right after this would happen, you'd pretty much just get a scene of Deku and Bakugo both walking out of that area, having defeated All Might, who at this point wasn't necessarily unconscious, but he was definitely weakened. That being said, after this would take place, we were now finally going to be covering the events of the Forest Training Camp arc. Now, this is where Deku's finally going to be meeting Koda, which I think might be a little bit of a cool moment for Koda, because I don't think that he would react to Deku the same way, considering the fact that Izuku has a water quirk, which is really, really cool in his opinion. And Izuku knows a lot about the heroes, the Hosu heroes, which is, I believe, what they went under their alias, right? I'm not sure, but we're going to be rolling with that. The students would immediately end up arriving to a hilltop where they can overlook miles away the place where they're actually going to be staying at. And it'd be at this point that Pixie Bob would use her abilities to send the kids crashing to the ground, and they now have to face off against all of Pixie Bob's monsters. After this would happen, we would then end up getting the students going all through that, finally making their way to the actual, camp that they're going to be staying at, and then we would then get a couple of days worth of the students training on their quirks. When it comes to Deku, I think that the main thing that he's going to be working on would be combat against the Wild Pussycats, just because they're going to be helping him stay sharp, and he's also going to be working on using water that is only of his own. So he's not going to be able to use outside water sources and not have as much access to that, which is something that he desperately needs to work on, because yes, Deku still is an incredibly lethal opponent. If you catch him without any nearby water source, say you're like at a literal desert, Deku is still going to be giving people troubles. Like, it's not something that's going to be impossible for Deku, if you know what I mean. That said, eventually Izuku would meet Koda, and I can see small little interactions changing between the two of them. Deku, in like the original, still ends up saving Koda from falling when Minetta's trying to perv on the girls, and he is actually going to having a couple more interactions with Koda, just due to the fact that Koda's quirk is literally a water quirk. So I could see Izuku pretty much trying to resonate with Koda and telling him that he knows who his parents were, and telling him that his parents would have been so proud. That I could see taking Koda and making him extremely upset. At this point, he would just go silent and walk off into the forest. Deku, realizing that he definitely said something wrong and he probably shouldn't have brought up his parents, would end up following after Koda, to which he would see him just pretty much standing on the side of a cliff on a mountain. Izuku, noticing this, would feel horrible about what he had said to Koda, bringing back those memories that Izuku knows are there, but he kind of just feels like it's something Koda's gonna have to deal with, if you know what I mean. But regardless, he still couldn't help but feel bad. And with that being the case, Izuku would opt to just kind of leave Koda alone, deciding to maybe just walk away and talk about this some other time, when suddenly Izuku could see a shadowy figure coming from the distance, and Izuku, noticing this, would stay behind to watch to see who exactly this is. Immediately, Muscular would reveal himself, oozing killer intent, as Izuku, noticing that this guy is clearly up to no good, would quickly show himself, as he would shoot a geyser of water towards Muscular, who would block it using one arm and his muscles to stay standing in the same place. Deku, noticing this and realizing that Muscular's a lot stronger than he looks, even though like the dude's massive and he already looks strong, Deku underestimated just how much pressure he had to use in that water. He would tell Koda to get behind him, and Muscular would say, well, I guess it's my lucky day. I get to kill two brats. As from here, he would say, hey, aren't you the kid who won the UA Sports Festival? I guess I'm gonna get a great fight out of this. As he would then lunge towards the direction of Izuku, punching him, as Izuku, not having any of it, would simply open his mouth as a beam of water would shoot towards Muscular, sending him flying back, to which Muscular would enhance his muscle fibers, standing in place as Izuku would up the water pressure, but Muscular would continue walking closer and closer, as Muscular would say, would pretty much start getting cocky about things, and Koda, seeing that Izuku was fighting for them, would shoot his water quirk towards the direction of Muscular, as he would say, leave him alone. From here, you'd pretty much just get Muscular being like, you guys remind me of some people I killed a long time ago. And Koda, hearing this, would realize that this is the man who killed his parents. Izuku, noting this, would realize that Muscular is clearly not a good dude. And realizing that while yes, he could probably use his trident ability to throw some at Muscular, or even use his water slashes, which are extremely sharp and could probably pierce Muscular and like deal damage over time, Izuku, it hit a nerve to know that this dude killed his parents, and Koda realized it right in front of him. Izuku at this point would decide to test out an ability that he had been saving for the Nomus. Izuku would shoot water at the direction of Muscular with the intent of literally drowning him. Izuku would fill up his esophagus and his nose with so much water that Muscular couldn't even breathe, and Muscular would simply fall unconscious as he would try his best to breathe some air, but it was just literally impossible for Muscular, and Izuku, taking advantage of this, would proceed to decimate Muscular with a bunch of water slashes as he would beat down Muscular, and ultimately Muscular, running out of oxygen and any opportunities, would fall unconscious. Izuku, showing this to Koda, would tell him that he never has to fear about that villain ever again, and Koda would actually end up hugging Izuku on his leg as they would make their way towards Aizawa, Deku leaving him there and rushing off to help his classmates. After this would happen, we'd pretty much get Izuku bumping into Tokiyami, and I believe his name is Shoji, as well as Katsuki and Todoroki, who would both quickly take out Moonfish, and then we would pretty much get the situation where Ochako and all of them end up meeting together, like around the moment that Bakugo and Tokiyami get kidnapped. And we would get the students noticing this as, I was about to say Moonfish, but yeah, no, that's definitely not his name. Mr. Compress would end up taking the both of them. Deku, using his water abilities, would end up creating a water dragon, as jumping on top of it, he would proceed to like lunge towards the direction of what did I literally just say his name was? Right, Mr. Compress. Izuku at this point would catch up to him and would grab two orbs, but Mr. Compress would have been hiding one under his mask, and it'd be at this moment that Mr. Compress would actually end up getting away with Bakugo just like he does in the original, even though Deku was able to nearly catch both of them. As this would happen and Izuku would realize that he only managed to save Tokiyami, Izuku would be pissed because yeah, Bakugo, hasn't exactly been the best of him over the years, but recently Izuku would felt as though that weird thing that's been between them, separating them for so long, was finally starting to dissipate, and now Bakugo could be dead, and it's all his fault. If he would have just acted faster, if he would have done better, Bakugo would be... But Izuku would realize that he can't think like that. He can't do that to himself. So Izuku would understand that there's nothing he could have done in that moment, and or at least tell himself that, not really understanding it, but just lie to himself about that, as ultimately, just like in the original, Momo and Kirishima and Ida and I think Araraka was with them, I'm not sure, all of them would end up deciding that they're going to be going after Bakugo and trying to save him, to which we would finally get all the events set up perfectly for the Hideout raid arc. Everything would go just like you guys would normally expect, with All Might and all the heroes crashing in and taking on a bunch of the League of Villains, to which I just gotta say, quickly, time out. Wasn't it so cool the way that the pro heroes handled them? I mean, these are villains that in the previous Force training camp arc seemed so deadly, so dangerous, but the pro heroes took them out like it was absolutely nothing with so much ease and efficiency, which is like my favorite thing. Then we get the section that of all the heroes who win against All For One and found him, they get absolutely decimated. And then we get the section where all the Nomus get destroyed and stuff like that, so that's cool, right? We would also get the battle between All For One and All Might. And normally in these specific videos, I tend to have this tendency to make Deku step in with All Might, and they both face off against the big bad All For One, but I just don't see that realistically happening in this timeline. Deku is nowhere near close enough to All Might to step in immediately, and because All Might's the type of character who would pretty much tell him thank you for rescuing Bakugo, because they still would do so, right? Like, it just becomes so much easier. Deku, using his water whip, would be able to grab Bakugo and save him quickly, and even better than they did in the original. And All Might would stay facing off against All For One. This ultimately leads us to having the same battle until Deku notices that All Might is actually faltering to All For One. This leads Deku to feeling absolutely helpless, as Deku would extend one water whip towards a tower and another one, similar to what Spider-Man does, as he begins pulling back, changing the properties of the water to be sort of elastic, as he would go on to look at Bakugo and ask him if he could help out. Bakugo at this point would grab onto Deku's torso and shoot explosions behind him with the other hand, as he would propel him even further, and suddenly they would let him go, as Deku would be propelled as far as possible, with him creating water wings just to help him steer in the air. Problem with him not using these and just flying there is that the water wings aren't aerodynamic to actually be able to fly in the air. That's something that Deku's been working on but still hasn't perfected. And so Deku would end up landing nearby the battlefield as Izuku, realizing that he was going to overshoot it by a bit, would use a water whip to grab onto one of the lights nearby and yank himself towards that direction. Mind you, because Deku was coming in from the air, All Might didn't even see this coming, and so Deku would have ended up creating some sort of gigantic kaiju dragon out of all the water that he could possibly muster, drinking a water bottle as he's doing that. His costume actually has like a little bit of you guys know like those hats that have like straws on them that you can drink out of while you're like doing whatever. Deku would be using that as he's drinking a ton of water as he's using this ability, and this gigantic water dragon just point blank hits All For One, who just wasn't expecting it. And as that happens, you get All Might come crashing in as the smoke is clearing up, as he would hit his United States of Smash, absolutely clobbering All For One, who would have no answer to the help of Izuku and All Might. They would take out All For One, and everybody nationwide would begin cheering for All Might, the symbol of peace, who had just defeated one of the most powerful villains that they had seen. They would wonder what's next, but ultimately, that's up to you guys. Hit the like button, ladies and gentlemen. That's been it for, what was it, part 4? And there's probably going to be 2, if not 1 more part to this. So with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, I love each and every single one of you guys. It has been your boy Xehther, and I am out. Peace.